Application rules are kind of a Swiss Army knife to help in a lot of different processing tasks and metadata generation tasks within security analytics. They can be used to offload logic and expensive computation from investigation and reporting by moving more complex queries earlier on in the processing pipeline. Can also be used to tag data with metadata as it's coming in. Lots of different use cases for it. We'll show you one in just a second here, but where you configure application rules is on a decoder. So every decoder has the option of coming in and creating app rules just for that decoder. You can always also push them to multiple decoders. So if I come into the decoder, I'll go into the configuration menu, and within that there's an app rules tab. So this is where all the application rules are created. Now, there are a lot of out-of-the-box application rules that serve various functions. The most important thing to understand about where they get applied is they get applied after parsers have run. So all the all the metadata from any parsers that have been run is available in these queries and these rules, as well as after feeds have run. So they're kind of the last pre-processing step before data gets written to the database. Now, like I mentioned, there are lots of different use cases for it. One of the most common use cases, however, is taking multiple variables in a more complex query that might have slower types of operations like contains or begins, even regular expressions, and putting that processing together in this rule, forcing security analytics to do it in a very high-speed fashion upon capture, and then writing the results effectively to a single meta key, such that when queried in a post-processing way through investigation or through the reporting engine, we're only querying on one single key rather than using complex logic. So one example of an application rule, maybe we want to tag all outbound executable traffic. Right? So we just want to understand when executables are leaving the environment, but don't want any kind of complex queries happening in the reporting engine for it. And we want the metadata to also exist in investigation. So to create an application rule is pretty straightforward. Press the plus button, give it a name. I'm going to call this one outbound exe. I've already pasted or copied a session here, but you can kind of see it's the same query language that's used throughout security analytics. So I've got all the metadata available from either feeds, parsers, or application rules that are ordered higher up in the list. So any of the list you just saw, anything that's ordered higher up, if it generates metadata, it's available to subsequent application rules. So here I've got alert equals outbound, and then an aggregate condition where file type is Windows executable, and a few other conditions here. So I can add whatever logic I would like in here. The nice thing is this logic is very quick to execute in this pre-processing app rule as compared to post-processing queries. So you got your condition, and then we have a few options. You see in the session data column here, there's this thing that says stop rule processing. Well, one of the a little bit more fringe use cases for app rules might be certain types of truncation or filtering of data. So if I have a certain condition that evaluates true, I can say do not evaluate this traffic against any subsequent app rules, and then either keep it, so basically just stop processing entirely, but keep the entire payload and the metadata. I can filter, or I can truncate, right? So truncate, an example of truncate is, let's say there were passwords that I've found within this session, and I want to keep the metadata, but I don't want to keep those passwords or the raw data associated with that particular session. I can tell security analytics to truncate. We're not going to focus on these options today. We're going to focus on the more common use case, which is effectively generating metadata. So whenever this condition evaluates true, I want to put this value, outbound exe, I want to put it into, basically tag it. I want to put it into a meta value. Now this says alert. It's a little bit misleading. This should really just say tag. So I can say tag, and this should say tag on, and what meta category do I want to put that text value into. So naturally you could create your own. I am going to put it into the alert meta category here. So when I go into my queries now, instead of having to put in this entire logic, all I'm going to have to do is look for alert being equal to outbound exe, and I'll know this condition evaluated true. So I press OK. Should create, at the very bottom here, you should see our new application rule, outbound exe. A little red tag that signifies that it hasn't been saved yet. So if I click apply, any changes that I've made to the app rules, you'll see in the rules to be applied window. I click apply, and that rule is now active on the decoder. If I want to, I can do a number of different things with this or multiply selected application rules. In this case, I've selected outbound exe. If I go to actions, I can actually export either just the selection or my entire list to a file that's importable at a later date. If I'd like to replicate that rule to other decoders in my environment, again, I can either push all of them or just the one I've selected, and that will give me a list of all the other decoders I want to apply it on. So what does it look like? Well, in this case, I've taken this condition, I've applied it in a pre-processing fashion, and I'm going to be putting the outbound exe tag into the alert meta key if that is true. So if I flip over to my investigation view here, I can see my alert meta tag is already open, and at that point forward, after creating the rule, if any traffic matches that, I should see the meta tag, which I do here, outbound exe, and I have it as another nice, efficient way to drill down into that traffic without having to do any complex logic after the stuff has been written to the database. Very powerful feature within Security Analytics.